You want the COVID blues? Okay. You ready?
I am ready.
Hey, it's Ross Hogarth here. I'm in my studio Boogie Motel, and I'm coming to you for the Sweetwater 2020 GearFest. I want to thank Sweetwater and my pals at Manley for inviting me to do this video. It's kind of kooky that none of us will be there in Fort Wayne in person to hang. It's the times we're in. We're getting down with our COVID. Get down with the COVID. And so that's where we're at. You know, I'm here hanging out in my world and bringing my world to your world.
Well, thank you, Ross. I guess to get us started, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, you know, where you got your start in the industry, and we can keep it brief.
Yeah, right. Well, I was born, no. Yeah, I grew up in New York, and I played in bands, punk music when I was a kid, played all sorts of instruments, you know, guitar, drums, French horn. And I had this epiphany that I would be in Fort Wayne, Indiana in the middle of winter playing to a jukebox. No, not Fort Wayne, but somewhere in the Midwest in the middle of winter playing to a jukebox, playing cover songs in a crushed velvet suit, and it scared the piss out of me. And it made me reconsider making my living as a musician or even being a musician, which I consider myself a musician. But I came out to California by the good graces of my brother. I left New York, started work on the road, and was a guitar tech and a drum tech and a sound man and a production manager, which led to just getting the bug of recording and getting into studios. And I've been an engineer and a mixer and a producer. I don't mix everything I engineer. I don't produce everything I engineer. I do mix, engineer everything I produce. And I've been doing it almost 4 decades, to date myself.
Can you give us a very brief list of some of the artists that you may have worked with, or some of the records that you've worked on?
I kind of have to walk through it decade by decade, but one of the first things I did was work on a record called The Visitor in Africa with Mick Fleetwood. I did Christine McVie, her record, and worked for Giorgio Moroder in the 80s, so we did both Beverly Hills Cops and Top Gun and some other movies. I was in a studio called Rumbo, so I did Rat and Dio, and that studio we built Mellencamp Studio in Bloomington, Indiana, called Belmont Mall, where Scarecrow onward, Scarecrow, Lonesome Jubilee, Big Daddy, whenever we wanted. Both James McMurtry records were done back there. I'll get to that later, but I'm producing his newest record right now. Let's see, the 90s, staff engineer at the record plant, worked on a ton of stuff that I wouldn't have otherwise worked on if it wasn't for that, like Celine Dion and a bunch of stuff like that. I got Grammys for Keb Mo and Ziggy Marley in the 2000s producing his first 2 records. I've done a bunch of records with Keb Mo. I got another Grammy for Taj Mo a couple of years back for the Taj Mahal Keb Mo record. I think I'm forgetting another one. There's another doorstop somewhere. And in the last few years, Van Halen, Doobie Brothers, Rita Coolidge. You know, I love what I do. A long list of stuff.
Oh, that's all good. Thank you. So you obviously, you mentioned some studios that you've worked out of over the years, and currently you are in your home studio. So when did you build out a studio for yourself at home?
Oh, it was kind of funny. I bought this house after the earthquake. I bought it from a friend of mine who played in the Eurythmics, who got scared by the earthquake. We all did, but he is English, and he got really scared and took his family and went back to England. So long story short, I did a for sale by owner, and that was in 1995, 96. And so when I bought it, I took this space I'm in, which was the garage. And before I moved in, I vaulted the ceiling, made it a really nice space, what we call a man cave here in California. And so I made it a really nice man cave. It had no gear in it or anything. I double doored, double glassed, didn't float the floor, but made it soundproof as best as possible. And my intention was to have a drum kit and do pre-production for bands and just have a room. And it just eventually became like starting in the early 2000s, 2003 or 4, I started to mix all my records here except for Van Halen, which we mixed up at 5150 up at Eddie's studio.
Gotcha. So this question becomes especially relevant in this day and age, and with this topic that we're discussing right now, remote recording and remote record production. But what are your thoughts on working in a home studio as opposed to being in a commercial facility?
I mean, ultimately, it always came down, the home studio versus remote and all that. I mean, ultimately, it always just comes down to a good song, a good performance, making a good record. One of the things for me that mixing my records here I absolutely love is always having a sweet spot, like never having to go down the end of a 96 input console away from the center section and having the speakers over somewhere over there, and now I'm all the way down here, or maybe I have a set of NS10s down here, but I don't love them because my main speakers are in the middle, or going to the back of the room where gear is and I'm reaching down for a compressor and an EQ, but I'm actually in the bass trap, so it sounds really funky, so I don't hear what I'm hearing, and I come back up. So I love being in my spot, making my records, having my ergonomic where my keyboard and everything is just perfect, and I don't ever get neck, like on a console where your hands go like this. But when it comes to the creative thing, I'm still not really loving not being in the room with a musician. There are things that I'm doing long distance on the couple records I'm producing right now, but in general, I would like to be in the room, but that's not going to stop me at this point. Part of my deal is I'm a sonic merchant, and I love when I have my hands on the sounds and get the performances that I want. So it's a mixed bag right now. It's definitely, I guess it's a quality problem because I've got a spot like this to work in, and I've got musicians and friends that are amazing, and we're still working.
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's very important for us all to remain grateful for the good stuff, in the midst of all of this. I know you share that sentiment as well, as we've discussed in the past. So to go back in time a little bit, prior to COVID-19, prior to this mandated or otherwise lockdown that we've been under for a while now, had you done many or any remote sessions like this?
Yeah, I mean, remote recording, I've been doing remote recording for years and years, honestly. I got turned on to it in the 2000s. We would use AOL chat, we would open up live chat, be doing stuff. Like, I have a friend of mine named John Fields who's really been doing it a long time. And he and I were doing a lot of stuff together. And he had musicians up in Minneapolis. My buddy Tommy Barbarella, who played in Prince's band, he played organ on Love Is My Religion, which we won a Grammy for with Ziggy Marley. And that was 2005 or 6 or something. So, sporadically, we would be doing it when we needed to do it. For me, like I said, I am someone who really likes that in-the-moment interaction where someone plays something that I really like, but it's close, and then you go, yeah, but that thing, and you do, and I know like Source Connect and some of these other, we can do Skype or whatever, have the Zoom over our shoulders, but there's something about being in the room. I have to say that for me, recording really is a contact sport in general.
Coming back to current times, can you give us a specific example of how you've run a session or a back and forth, or just the process that you're currently going through in record production, and how that plays out across all avenues, like talking about the tracks, talking about recording, how it technically works from a gear perspective, like what gear are you using, are they using, how are you communicating about all this?
I'm producing a record with Americana singer-songwriter James McMurtry, and before the COVID came down, I've been playing the COVID came down blues, just so you know. The guitar tuned it open D, and I just sit here and play the COVID came down blues. It's been on my mind. Anyway, so before the COVID hit, I was almost done with the recording of James's record, but I had keyboards to do and some more guitar parts to do. My guitar player on the record is David Grissom. He lives in Austin, Texas, and he's got a nice setup at home. And we're used to actually doing the long distance. He played on my Rita Coolidge record and played some solos and some overdubs and some things on the record long distance. So he and I have a really good relationship, rapport, and communication. We've been making records together since I helped get him in John Mellencamp's band in the late 80s and played on those 2 McMurtry records with John's band. So with David, it's just like I send him a stem of the drums, stem of the bass, guitar. I try to keep it down to a more cut down session, send him the session, and then we just go back and forth and communicate. And on the organ and all those things that I was hoping to have Ben Tench play or other people, I've had to use a couple of different guys, and we're in the process of that. Kenny Aronoff, he has a studio of his own that he plays drums, and he's done all the percussion. So he played. I was starting in here to play percussion myself, and I was like, let's get Kenny, So I got Kenny, and he's played all the percussion. It's, how are you going to compare to Kenny, who we all know is one of the greatest musicians, drummers, people. And then this other record, the Edgar Winter, Johnny Winter project, which is a tribute to Johnny that Edgar and I started a year ago. That's been this ongoing project with like the bucket list of guitar players. We have all the tracks cut, basically bass and drums, but we've been adding all like the guys, like on this record we have Warren Haynes, Billy Gibbons, Kenny Wayne Shepherd, Joe Bonamassa. We're getting Buddy Guy, then Joe Walsh, Keb Mo's going to be on it, Derek Trucks is going to be on it, and there's a bunch more names that I'm not coming up with. But so we're not yet there with those guys, but we really wanted Edgar's vocals in place. And so what I was using on Edgar, he bought himself a 67 reissue that sounded really good. So instead of me putting my vintage 67, and having it just be dedicated to him, he has a spot. I helped with another guy put a Pro Tools rig in his house and put a studio where he had sort of this makeshift little room. And so Edgar could cut his vocals on his own during this time now. I took the 67 and the mic pre and brought my Manley LOP Plus, which I helped, Ivana and the company, and I go all the way back with that compressor limiter, the original LOP. I've been using it as kind of my exclusive vocal compressor cutting for years. So I gave Edgar the LOP 2 and put it in his studio so he could cut his own vocals. And so what he does is he will track his own vocals. Edgar is legally blind, so he has to get his face right up on the screen. So it's really hard to have two people working together with him. If he wants to actually have his hands on, then it's almost impossible for anyone else to be there. So it makes it actually really doable. It's one of the things that I've been perfectly at peace with, which is having the LOP 2 and his setup on the 67 and the mic pre, so that he can have his own vocal setup and do things whenever he wants. And then he sends me, I've taught him how to send files over the internet through WeTransfer. And so I'll get the files and I'll listen to them and I'll say, hey, can we fix this line and that line? And so he's permanently set up in his house, and he's actually working while we're in this pushing pause kind of mode. Not, COVID pause.
COVID pause. So, Avi, I was going to ask you about some challenges that you faced, but that I think you kind of covered it in that one. Here's another question for you. What's one aspect of this current forced remote recording scenario that has gone better than you expected, or has otherwise surprised you?
So one of the things that's come out of this is actually Zoom. I was using Zoom before a little bit for teaching, but Zoom has become now our way of communicating one-on-one. The communication back and forth keeps my attitude, the attitude is everything. I mean, if I have a decent attitude on any day, then I can look at the upside of something and maybe not the downside. I mean, we are in a time where, I saw the number today, and it'll be different whenever people listen to this. It was 118,000 people or whatever passed away. So, if I focus on that, I can get pretty down and pretty dark. So the thing for me, and the thing with music, and the reason that I do what I do, is that I love what I do and it makes me feel good. I think if I feel good when I'm doing it, the music I'm working on probably has a better chance of making someone else feel that way. I mean, yeah, sometimes I'm making music to make happy kids pissed off and make pissed off kids happy. But, I mean, that's still the intention.
Very well said.
So, but what I found is that I'm surprised at how malleable or resilient I and the people I'm surrounded with have been. Instead of kicking and screaming every day through this, I try to focus on what I am grateful for, like you and I were talking, and the fact I do have quality problems in my life. Like I have a studio that's in a great space, and I'm in lockdown with, the woman that I've been married and love her, and we're still, we celebrated 34 years of marriage last week, and
Congratulations.
so it's, that's where I think if I keep a good attitude, or people keep a good attitude, or try to, have some, personal tools to have, some attitude adjustment when our heads go up our rear, which it's bound to happen, then I can pull my head out and stay present.
I think resilience is that's a good way to put it. So what are a few pieces or a piece of advice that you would give to an aspiring producer or engineer, whether they're working in the same room as an artist or not, as is the case right now?
Don't give advice. No. It only shows up like criticism. I've learned that from experience, but since you asked, but one of the pieces of advice, I think I just gave one of them, which is have a good attitude. But the other one is to say yes more than no, and I don't mean that in a people-pleasing, sacrifice yourself, say yes to things that you resent yourself for saying yes. But, it's mistakes I've made. I can only speak from my own experience. I look back on some of the mistakes I made, which then I altered when I realized the result of them. So you're in a studio with a young band, and some guy, the musician, the lead singer, says, "Man, can I cut the vocal lying on my back on the couch?" And instead of just saying, "No, you can't do that, that's insane." Because if I say that, which I did the first time the artist wanted to do that, he got pissed at me and then gave me the vocals that he probably ever sang, because it was his way of, being not even passive aggressive. So I could have said yes, and I could have given him a shot at it, and maybe he could have heard it come out of the speakers, and maybe he would have been great. I don't know. So, often we jump to a no instead of a yes. And then so if you say yes to something that someone wants to try, it usually keeps the air in the room. It can take the air right out of the room if you say no. So if I'm willing to keep my mind open and let someone ask me to try something that I may not have done, or maybe I think it's not going to work, and then I say yes and I try it, it comes out great, I'm always happier that I said yes and didn't say no, because even in that no, when you take all the air out of the room, you end up taking away inspiration, and often taking away that magic thing that tends to happen when there's a yes vibe. I don't know if that was the answer you were hoping to get or not, but yeah, keep an open mind. I think if there's anything, it would be keep an open mind. If I was going to say one thing, and I say this to young people coming up, where when I came up, there was a lot of quote unquote like hazing kind of attitude. It was like paying your dues, and I believe in paying dues, or I believe in hard work creating opportunity. And I don't dig entitlement, or people that believe they're entitled to anything. But at the same time, I think, there's a better attitude by some of us more veteran guys, where I think there were things that we were made to do and feel that weren't particularly empowering, that I think have lost like those things are going away. And I don't think any young person needs to be made to feel like crap to learn a lesson unless they really deserve that. And that's what I mean about the hazing mentality. You know, here, just you clean those toilets for 6 months and then someday maybe I'll put you in the room or something. It's like, why is that person going to stay around? You know?
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And of course, now here we are, and you've got the home studio, and because of COVID times, not only are you the engineer, but you're also your own intern and the janitor, and you're making your own coffee again.
Dude, I've been chief cook and bottle washer my whole career. I don't think it's going to change. I've gotten used to it. So
you've been preparing your whole life for this moment.
Totally. King of isolation.
Well, thank you so much, Ross. I think that's about all we have time for at this point. But I really, really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us here and for participating. And huge thanks to Sweetwater as well.
Yeah, I mean, I want to give a shout out. First off, again, I have always loved, and I love coming to Sweetwater. The many times that I've come and done things back there in the studio. We beat up the studio one time with Kenny and a band when it wasn't even really a studio yet, and we've done a lot of things with Royer and Mojave back there, and then Manley and Dangerous, and you know, I have a long history with Ivana. Like I say, I go all the way back to her bringing amplifiers to Jackson Brown's studio, and we've been friends really since we're both, you know, a lot younger. I mean, well, for me, a lot younger. She's timeless. She's only probably 17 or 18 now. I don't know how old. Maybe Ivana's 25. I don't know. But I've always loved being part of Manley and Sweetwater. So again, I'm just going to give my shout out and props back. And I appreciate being asked to just chew the fat a little bit and give some love. And I will always do that. And like I said, the LOP it's on my vocal with Edgar, and we're making this record, and I hope I get to finish it in due time with all these great guitar players, and you guys get to hear it. And yeah, so much love.
Much love to you too, Ross. Thank you very much. And, you know, go make yourself some coffee.
Oh, yeah, I have mine here. So. All right, well, peace out, and you guys be good. Stay happy, stay safe, stay sane, stay healthy. That's the COVID blues. That's the slow COVID blues, you know?